Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain, and let's get into our episode.
Intelligentsia, the endem of sarcasm, the nutty professor to your whack-ass marmalade. It's T-Bone from T-Bone and Chick Brew in the morning. Now available in podcast format. Simply search for the T-Bone and Chick Brew podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. Of course, I'm your host, Jerome McClain. Independent media that won't reinforce tribalism. We have one planet. Nobody is leaving. And so let us reason together. Now, let me get right into the show to say exactly what I want to say about a certain situation. I think I've already made it fairly certain that I left the show to reflect and I came back to, oh boy. And so I want to talk about something that will probably take up the majority of the show, but is the moral weight of empire. The moral weight of empire. From Libya to Iraq to Egypt to Iran, and the American consciousness. And we have to talk about this today, family, like adults. And I know this is going to be a difficult one to open up the show for a Monday. But I'm getting ready to turn 40 years old. And so for about 40 years, basically my entire adult life, the United States has treated the Middle East like a chessboard. Presidents come and go, parties come and go, parties flip, rhetoric changes, but the pattern, and that's what we do as humans, we're pattern-seeking animals, the pattern remains the same. Saddam must go, Gaddafi must go, Mubarak must go, Assad must go, Iran must be stopped. And every time this happens, it's framed as a moral necessity for freedom, democracy, stability, security. But if we're going to call ourselves moral thinkers, if we're going to say we believe all lives matter, then we must stop evaluating foreign policy like sports fans and start weighing it like judges, because there is blood in these decisions, and blood has moral weight. Iraq, the war that reordered a region. So let's start there. In 2003, when I was in the 11th grade, the United States invaded under the banner of weapons of mass destruction. We were told Saddam Hussein posed an imminent threat. We were told it was about security. We were told it was about liberation. The weapons were never found, but the war happened anyway. Over 4,400 American service members died. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi citizens died, depending on whose estimates you trust. A nation is fractured along sectarian lines, and in the vacuum created by a regime collapse, extremist groups like ISIS rose from the ashes. Now pause. This is not revisionist history or revisionist hindsight. This is moral accounting. When you topple a government, even a government you think is a brutal one, you own the aftermath. You don't get to claim moral superiority and then walk away from the consequences of what you have caused. Power carries responsibility. And that power, when it has the power of destabilization of a region, for decades we have to ask, was the moral calculus honest? Not emotional. Was it honest? Libya, Gaddafi must go. Muammar Gaddafi, it was his term. brutal, erratic, authoritarian. The United States, alongside NATO, intervened in 2011. The language was humanitarian, protect civilians, prevent massacre, and Gaddafi fell. But what followed? Militias, chaos, the return of slavery to Libya, and a fractured state that still hasn't stabilized. And here's the pattern. We are excellent at killing people. We are excellent at removing leaders. We are far less excellent at building nations. And if we're honest, sometimes we were never truly interested in the rebuilding part at all. The moral question is not whether Gaddafi was good or bad. No human is good or bad, and he wasn't either. The moral question is whether the destabilization without a sustainable path forward was wisdom or hubris. Egypt, Mubarak must go. Then we have to move to Egypt. Jose Mubarak had ruled for nearly 30 years. When the Arab Spring erupted, the United States signaled that he must step aside. Democracy was the language, but what followed was political turmoil, a brief Muslim Brotherhood government, then a military takeover under the Sisi. What did we achieve? Was the region more stable? Was the democratic vision realized? Or did we simply insert ourselves in another sovereign nation's internal reckoning again without long-term clarity? When you play referee in another country, internal politics, you don't get to pretend neutrality. There is always a ripple. Iran, the perpetual villain. Since 1979, actually since 1953, but we'll start at 1979 here, the Islamic Republic has positioned itself as a adversary. They chant death to America, they fund proxy militias, and they posture regionally, and yes, they have American blood on their hands through proxy forces. But here's the deeper questions. Have we approached Iran strategically or reflexively? Because for decades, our policy towards Iran has oscillated between sanctions, threats, limited diplomacy, and whispers of regime change. Every few years, the drum set and the drum beat comes out, and the drum beat starts again. Iran must be stopped. Iran must be isolated. Iran must collapse. Iran needs regime change. But what is the end game? What does regime collapse look like in a nation of over 90 million people? Do we engage? Do we imagine it would be neat, orderly, democratic, overnight? We had similar thinking and thoughts about Iraq. But moral seriousness demands that we learn from history. This pattern of he must go, notice something here. For 40 years, the American foreign policy instinct in the Middle East has been leader-centric. We have believed that if you remove the man, you fix the nation. Saddam must go. Gaddafi must go. Mubarak must go. Assad must go. The Ayatollah must go. But nations are not Lego sets. When you remove the top piece, the whole structure shifts. And if you are not prepared for the collapse, you are not operating seriously, operationally, ethically, morally. You are operating ideologically. Now we have to get to the Israeli alignment and the regional policy. So let's address the elephant in the room. Israel's security concerns have heavily influenced U.S. policy in the region, particularly regarding Iraq and Iran. Now that's not conspiracy. That's just geopolitics. Israel saw Saddam as a threat. Israel seen Iran as an existential threat. And American leadership across administration has aligned strategically with that assessment. The moral issue is not whether Israel has legitimate security concerns. Every nation has legitimate security concerns. The moral issue is whether Americans' blood and regional destabilizations have been weighed independently or automatically tendered to align with Israel's politics. As alliances do not and cannot remove moral responsibility. Alliances increases moral responsibility. If American sons and daughters are sent into war, the justification must be crystal clear in the terms of American interests, not assumed through alliance gravity. So let's be plain here. Since the early 1980s, the U.S. involvement in the Middle East has included military invasions, covert operations, sanctions regimes that impact civilians, support for authoritarian allies, pressure campaigns to remove and murder leaders, and the region remains unstable. So what is the measurable, operational, tactical, or moral success? If after 40 years the outcome is chaos, extremism, a refugee crisis, and generational trauma, we must ask whether our posture has been stabilizing or combustible. Moral thinkers cannot avoid that question. Now, there's a myth of clean intervention, and there's no such thing as clean intervention. Every bomb has a blast radius. Every sanction has unintended victims. Every regime change creates a power vacuum. Every vacuum invites predators. We are powerful enough to initiate change, but are we humble enough to anticipate the consequences? That is the moral test of empire. Consistency is the heart of the matter. And that brings us back to the core issue. We condemn violence at home with clarity. We say never again after school shootings. We call individual killers evil. But when national policy foreseeably results in civilian deaths abroad, we pivot to silence or nuance. Now, I'm not saying war and mass shootings are identical. But what I am saying, moral consistency has to start mattering. If life is sacred, if children are sacred, then they are sacred everywhere. If life has intrinsic value, then that value does not expire at the border. If we are going to speak in moral absolutes, we must apply our moral absolutes universally. American interests versus moral posturing has always been a problem, and here's the hard part. Sometimes foreign policy isn't about morality. It's about interest. It's about oil. It's about trade routes. It's about regional balances of power and strategic allies. Fine. Then don't lie to the American people. Say that. And don't baptize strategy as righteousness. Don't frame power politics as a moral crusade. Because when we dress real politique in moral language, we cheapen morality itself. And at the crossroads of conscience of the nation, it starts to corrode the conscience of the nation. And that's the weight of leadership. Moral leadership does not and cannot react emotionally. We have to calculate responsibly, reasonably. We have to ask, what is the second order effect? What is the third order effect? What does this place look like in 10 years from now after our intervention? And most importantly, is this necessary? Not is this satisfying? Not does this feel good at the moment. Not does this make us feel strong. But is this necessary? Strength without wisdom is recklessness. And recklessness with global power is catastrophic. 40 years of consequences now. Since I have been alive, roughly 4 decades, the Middle East has experienced the Iran-Iraq war aftermath, the Gulf War, sanctions on Iraq that devastated civilians, the 2003 invasions, the rise of ISIS, the Libyan collapse, the Syrian civil war and entanglements, Yemen humanitarian disaster, perpetual tensions with Iran, and through it all, American fingerprints are everywhere. That doesn't mean we are solely responsible, but it does mean we are not innocent bystanders. Power forfeits innocence. So here's the challenge to the moral thinkers. Stop thinking tribally. Stop evaluating policy based on which party initiated the policy. Stop equating criticism of intervention with weakness. Ask better questions. Demand strategic clarity. Demand moral coherence. Demand that if Americans' lives are at risk, that the objective is precise and limited. Demand that if a civilian lives will be lost, that the cost is acknowledged honestly, not lied about, not swept under the rug, not sanitized. Demand that alliances do not override independent judgment, because empire without introspection becomes arrogance. And arrogance with missiles, it becomes a tragedy. We have one planet. Nobody is leaving. The Middle East is not a chessboard. It is home to human beings. It is home to mothers, fathers, children, just like here. And if we're going to claim moral seriousness, we're going to say all lives matter, then we must approach war, sanctions, regime change, alliances, politics with gravity that it deserves. Not memes, not slogans, gravity. Because history does not remember intention, it remembers outcomes. And outcomes have names attached to them. That is the weight. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com and getting a membership for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show. The Jerome McClain Show is fully listener-supported, independent media that won't lead you to tribalism. Get a membership and support independent media at www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show.